We've learned a lot about connecting. A lot of this festival has been about connecting. Terrence Manali talked about it first in the film about his playwriting at the top, about the need for humans to connect. And in the science fair movie, we found that we have to have connections to, the scientists have to connect with each other. And we need a future of this planet. We have to be saved by the scientists because we've gotten ourselves into a lot of trouble with science. But we have to have the arts to connect in order to live with one another and to go forward. So those things are both really vital. And the idea of dancing to connect, we see exactly what that was able to do in so many different ways beyond dance, in terms of communication, in terms of self-image, in terms of defining oneself and overcoming the conflict. So it's just amazing synergy between these things, that your program and this film. Just to go to the filmmaking first, you guys are filmmakers anyway. Yeah. So how did you come on to this particular story, and where did you jump into it?
This actually started when I was sitting next to Imad at dinner, and he was telling me about the extraordinary work that Battery Dance was doing around the world. And first I responded as a former journalist. I'd been a journalist in India, and I thought to myself, this is a story that has to be told. But I'm also a trauma survivor myself, and I understand firsthand the power of the arts, especially movement to heal. And for me, that was an extremely important hook. And then I very quickly enrolled my husband, Mikael, who's also a filmmaker. And then fairly soon afterwards, we enrolled Rob Fruchtman, who is a Sundance Award-winning director. The first shoots were in India, and that was something that Mikael managed with Sanan Keshgi.
In India, because of the sensitive nature and the vulnerability of the girls, we did not want to use a Western crew, but one that was local crew. So I led that shoot from New York, and we hired people that worked in India. Then we moved on to Busan and to Bucharest. And there, our director, Rob Fruchtman, came with an American DP, Lex Fletcher. And then we had 3 cities, 3 workshops, and we began editing. And as you understand, to weave this story together and also include the story of Adel, the Iraqi young man, took some time, but we're very happy to be able to show the result for you now.
So did you obtain funding early on for this? Because it's obviously a really, really expensive enterprise.
There were a lot of names rolling past there at the end, wasn't there?
We initially went out to about 300 people, going back as far as 6th grade. And more than 40 donated, which is wonderful that they had faith that this was actually going to be possible to pull off. And then we managed to do production in 3 countries with what we raised from those 40 people. And then we kept putting it together during post and raised money little by little. And then we got a NISCA grant, which was wonderful. That made a huge difference for us.
And you also, I saw in some of the credits that I believe it was in Bucharest, you got some money from the government, is that correct?
No, it's called Romania One, and it's an American individual who, after making his money in California, took a great interest in Romania and the potential of rebuilding that country, particularly through the youth, which has been terribly underserved during the regimes there. So this film fitted his ambitions, and he was kind enough to give us some money.
Okay, so, and also before we get on to the Battery Dance Company, I wanted to also talk about, in terms of the filmmaking, there was wonderful a dance rhythm to the piece in terms of the cutting back and forth between the different things that you did in the editing. And it allowed each of the groups to develop its own personality and the individuals within the groups to develop their personalities. And to see the Romanian girl that was the troublemaker to go through all the iterations
Natalia.
that she did, and then to take responsibility for what had happened, and to acknowledge that. I mean, the maturity of some of these people, of course, because of a lot of the conflict that they're dealing with every day, but to work through that, and for Clement himself to work through what he had to work through in all those things. It was just a fascinating story and just so beautifully told. I want to talk just to the Battery Dance Company issue. So the Battery Dance Company existed prior to the Dancing to Connect situation. So how did that come about?
So Battery Dance is actually a 45-year-old organization. Well, you can do the math. We began in 1974, so before I was even born. Jonathan founded Battery Dance in Lower Manhattan in Tribeca as a way of giving dance to an area of New York that didn't really have the arts. It was just people going into their office buildings and construction workers with all of the buildings that were going up. It was a way of giving the arts and inserting some kind of life into the community down there. And so we started the Battery Dance Festival. You saw some of the images in it at the beginning of the film. In 1982, it was at the World Trade Center, South Street Seaport, before it was the South Street Seaport. So a lot of the work that we did, we immediately started also working in the New York City public schools, giving the arts and providing access to dance to underserved youth at Title I schools. Those are schools where the majority of the students are either on free or reduced cost lunch. So when Jonathan founded Battery Dance, it was all just about giving dance to people who didn't have access to it.
And then the idea of doing the Dancing to Connect, going international. How
Yes,
did that come
so
about?
that began in 2006. We started working in New York City schools. We actually in Germany as well, the Dancing to Connect idea started to come together as we were giving traditional arts education dance classes where it's teacher-led, you do this movement, follow my lead. The teachers found that the students were creating their own movement, that the creativity of the students was coming out. And so we tested this idea of, let's see if we can lead them in certain exercises where they themselves are the ones that generate the choreography, where they generate the dance movements. And so that began in 2006, and since then we've found that the methodology can be applied to any kind of social issue, whether it's North Korean defectors with South Koreans, whether it's victims of gender-based violence in India. We've been doing the program with refugees from the Middle East wars that have relocated to Germany, newly arrived refugees. We've been doing that in Germany for the past 2 years, or 3 years, I'm sorry, and we'll be continuing for the next couple of years, integrating those refugees and healing their trauma. So we found that not only is the creativity of the students coming out and that they're able to generate their own movement, therefore building their confidence and leadership and teamwork skills, but we're also healing a lot of the divides that we find throughout the world, and healing a lot of the conflict that we come across.
Well, and that is incredible because, as you said, there's the sort of the dance therapy movement of healing through movement is one thing, but it's also healing for internally for post-traumatic stress of a kind for the individual. But these divisions that you could see between the North Koreans and the Chinese defectors and the South Koreans and the completely different cultures, and then the way they got to be integrated, and also for the Roma, where even in their own community, there's people that are saying the gypsies are all bad, and so we're trying to bring that together. And you could see the way that it plays out, and the discussion in the film of if they don't learn respect at home, and then they don't learn it in the school, and then there is no respect, and then Clement's having to deal with that. But the growth that they had in that, so just the way that it all pulled together was kind of remarkable. So when you first got the idea from talking to Ahmad about doing this, and then you started to raise the money, and then you went out and did the shoots. So how much was there? I mean, you have to get a lot of funding for your own dance programs, yes?
Right. So
to travel internationally to do these things, that's a big heavy lift as well.
Absolutely.
Right. So was there any coordination between the fundraising for the film and Battery Dance? Is that how that worked?
Amelia, do you want to answer that?
Initially we wanted to follow the Dancing to Connect programs in Delhi, Mumbai, outside of Belfast, and in a predominantly Muslim neighborhood outside of Paris. And we only raised enough money to shoot in India. And so we knew that we wanted to interweave stories. And having shot in India, we also knew that we had to then wait until Battery Dance was going to some place where there would be a contrast and where there would be different teaching artists. So, for example, we couldn't go to Sri Lanka next when they went to Sri Lanka.
Right.
So there were those kinds of decisions, and South Korea with the North Korean escapees was a given, because there are such important issues being dealt with. And also the Roma kids in Romania, it's an issue. The plight of the Roma is an issue that many Europeans are aware of, but not many Americans are aware of. So that seemed important also.
And we should say it's been two separate ventures. Our enterprise is ours, and Battery Dance is theirs. But it's wonderful now to have Imad here. Sometimes when you make a documentary, it's not necessarily so that the subject you're making it about likes what you have done. But in this case, it's been a marvelous journey, because we have been so inspired of their work, and the teaching artists, Clement, everybody that you saw in the film, that are also transformed by these workshops, as you could tell, that we have landed in a true collaboration, and we benefit from the film, and you and the dancers following through the festival circuit and presenting their work with the film. And also our film is hopefully helpful for you to be able to.
Yeah, and I would
continue.
hope that people, and they must have been, and you can address this, but responding to it in the way that I'm talking about it, which is that, my God, this work is so important that this film would get the interest and awareness of things like the Roma and other issues that are going on, and what these kids are dealing with. I mean, what we learned from the North Korean girl, or the Chinese girl that was, beaten and swallowing zippers trying to get to the hospital, and what these people are going through, and what Adele went through. My God, just it's phenomenal. And so you would hope that there's more support for what you're doing, because it's so critically important. Have you found that to be the case?
This is your chance, Imad.
No, well, you're absolutely right about the film, and I have to, tip my hat to Mikhail Cornelia and director Rob Fruchtman for capturing, and Wendy Sachs, producer Wendy Sachs as well, for capturing the Dancing to Connect methodology so beautifully. Often when we talk about the work that we do, people don't really understand, and they've only begun to understand by watching the film. To see that transformation of the students and our participants over the course of 1 week. How does their life change through a dance workshop in 1 week? How do you really do that? And this film just beautifully captures it. And we are seeing increased support to Battery Dance's work. Of course, the threats against the arts are ever present and growing in the country. So it's always a struggle arguing for the need for the arts, for its value to society, for the importance in connecting all of us together. But it's, individuals like sitting next to Cornelia at dinner who believe in the power of the arts, that then come to the table and say, what can I do? What can I do to generate more
I gotta
impact?
stop having her say that, because she starts all these projects.
Well, but it begins with a connection. Everything begins with a connection.
Absolutely.
And the connection of you guys at the dinner table, and it grows from there, and other connections that happen. Just on a technical question, so with those 3 shoots, that's not only is it a heavy lift in terms of doing the shoots, but how much did you wind up with in terms of footage to get down to this film?
Well, it was over 100 hours. Of course, I think it was about 140 hours. The challenge was to weave, and Rob Fruchtman was also the main editor and started to create this wonderful tapestry. And then I worked with him, and Cornelia also worked with him to create certain segments of the film. So it was sort of a matter of penetrating a massive amount of material, but it was also to do very, very distinct selections, so that we didn't repeat information. Right. You saw the name game starting, and everybody was mentioning, but then we sort of could cut and cut our way through the story that way. So the editing, of course, was a long process, trial and error. But my hat off to Rob, who did a fantastic work, and it was very wonderful also to participate. We are both filmmakers, and work mostly in narrative films, actually, but also working with sound and with
Right.
writing original
And
music.
the sense that I have, and you say you're a former journalist and narrative films, and that comes through very clearly in the editing and so just speak briefly, because we're almost out of time, but about the writing of this, because you have your footage and you have the editing to put it together, but there has to be sort of a through line that you're writing for this, and as a journalist and as a filmmaker. Can you just address that?
And a lot of the writing is in the editing, so that with this initial concept of the interweaving, Rob did this very masterful job initially. I did a lot of selections from the interviews, then moved around pieces on paper, so that the boys, for example, those 3 boys, putting them in specific places. Starting at the very beginning, but then creating maybe a wish for the audience to see them again, and then they do come back again, you know?
Yeah.
Some screenwriting tricks there.
Yeah, and then there were also patterns that we were looking for. So, for example, at the very end, the way that the girls in South Korea were moving their arms, and then suddenly you cut to a girl in Delhi moving her arms the same way. And so it creates this sense of connection between the workshops.
And universal language, which is
Yes.
what you addressed in the beginning. So
Yeah.
we are out of time, but if you guys want to talk to the filmmakers, but they will be in the lobby.
Stick around.
So please mark your ballots. Make sure you go out this way. And please, a big hand for this tremendous
Thanks for
film.
coming.
Thank you.